Here is the war memorial. We'll take a closer look at some of the names. There's 3 hills, all from our immediate family who are recorded on here. One from the First World War, 2 from the Second World War. We'll have a look and I'll explain afterwards how they're connected to the family and sadly how they died. Here we are then, here's the first side, 1914-1918, and we have to have a look here. E.T. Hill. Eldred Thomas Hill. He was one of our family. I'll explain a little bit more about him later. Coming round the other side, 1939-1945. Once again, there are 2 hills, R.C. Hill and W.O. Hill. R.C. Hill is Ronald Charles Hill. He died in 1944. And the other one, W.O. Hill, is Wilfred Owen Hill, who also died in 1944. They died within a few months of each other. They were cousins. The first one of the 3 then is Eldred Thomas Hill. He was born in 1898, just before the turn of the century. At the time, both of his parents were 35. I'm not certain when he joined up. When the First World War started, in 1914, he would only have been 16, so he may not have been called up immediately. But anyway, when he was called up, he joined the Machine Gun Corps. Sadly, he was killed, as I said in the previous video, by a sniper. He was a dispatch rider. He was killed aged 19 in June 1918. So not really all that long before the end of the First World War. As I said in the previous video, Eldred was one of a family of 11 children, and there were quite a few boys, and they virtually all served in the First World War. The oldest one didn't. Courtney Hill was a railway plate layer, which was a reserved occupation, so he didn't go to war, but certainly his brothers did. His brother Sidney, my direct ancestor, went and joined the East Surrey Royal Fusiliers. His brother Charles went into the Queen's West Surrey Regiment, and his brother Ernest went into the Royal Artillery, and he served during the Battle of the Somme. Thankfully, all of his brothers survived. I have one other picture of Eldred. He looks about 15 to me, sitting on a deck chair in a garden, so a couple of years before the First World War started. If you log on to the Commonwealth War Graves Commission website, it's possible to enter a soldier's name, and then you can download a little certificate with a picture of the cemetery where they're buried and some details about which regiment they served in, which is quite nice. I've done it for all 3 of the soldiers on the war memorial in my family. Here's the certificate that I downloaded for Eldred. It says that he is buried in Faubourg d'Amiens in Arras, so in northern France. I do actually have a picture of his grave as well that I managed to find on the internet. You'll notice that the certificate says son of Julia Hill. That's because Eldred's father died in 1915. Henry Hill died in 1915. There is a bit of information about Eldred from his military records. He was entitled to the Victory Medal, although little good it would serve him. There is some information also about a war gratuity, some money that was paid to his mother in 1919, but I haven't really fully understood what that's all about. Moving on to the Second World War, Wilfred Owen Hill. Wilfred Owen Hill's father was Courtney Hill, the oldest of the 11 children, so Eldred Hill's oldest brother. Wilfred Owen was one of his sons. He died in August 1944, and he is buried in the Bayeux War Cemetery, So Bayeux is in Normandy. 1944 was when the Normandy invasion took place. So I'm guessing that Wilfred Owen, who served in the Life Guards, was involved in the Normandy operation, and sadly he lost his life there. Wilfred was born in 1917 during the First World War, and he married in April 1940 to Winifred Charman. He was 22 at the time, and obviously she became Winifred Hill. And sadly, when Wilfred died in 1944, he was 27. And his widow, Winifred Hill, lived until 2002. She died in 2002. Moving on to the third one then, Ronald Charles Hill. He was actually in the RAF Volunteer Reserve. He was a sergeant, a wireless operator, air gunner in a Wellington bomber. He was shot down over Holland in May 1944. He was aged 20. He's buried in a very small cemetery maintained by the Commonwealth War Graves Commission in Holland. It only contains 17 graves. One of his sisters, Kathleen Hill, did correspond for a while with a lady in Holland who helped to maintain the graveyard. And here is a picture of the very small graveyard on the download certificate from the Commonwealth War Graves Commission website. I do have a little bit more information on Ronald. A census was taken in England in 1939 at the outbreak of war, and Ronald is on that census. It shows that he was born in July 1923, so when the census was taken he was 16, and his job at the time was a garden boy. Ronald also features in this wedding photograph from 1940. It's the wedding of his sister, my grandmother, Patricia Emily Victoria Hill. It's at Pyrford Church in 1940, and Ronald is standing behind the groom, looking over his shoulder. And behind Ronald is his older brother, Eldred. Eldred is almost certainly named after Eldred Thomas Hill, his uncle who died in World War I. And to the right of the bride is Sidney Thomas Hill, the father. Anyway, I hope you found it interesting. That's the backstory behind some of the names on the war memorial at Pyrford Church. Many years have passed now since these soldiers and airmen sadly lost their life, but I thought it was a nice idea to record some of the story behind their lives, so that they're not completely forgotten and future generations can know a little bit about their ancestors and people that served this country and sadly gave their lives.